Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, I'm going to be doing episode 17 in my series on books that I loved to teach. And in today's episode, I'm going to be speaking about Cold Mountain, the first novel written by Charles Frazier. This is a novel that I taught in a senior English course called Contemporary Fiction. This novel is at once a Civil War story, a love story, and it's also a mythic quest story. It is set in the final days of the Civil War. And we're introduced to our two main protagonists, Inman, a Confederate soldier who's been hospitalized after being badly wounded in battle, and Ada Monroe, a beautiful young woman who is living alone on a huge family farm following the death of her father, a preacher named Monroe. Ada and Inman both live in the town of Black Cove, which is overlooked by Cold Mountain. The novel moves back and forth between the two protagonists as Inman tries to return home to Black Cove and Ada tries to survive there. Inman slowly regains strength and then proceeds to leave the hospital, although he still has a very large and very bad wound in his neck. He's haunted, absolutely plagued by nightmares about his time in battle, but he is also so powerfully in love with Ada that he wants to get home. He wants to see her as soon as possible. So we follow Inman through really horrific challenges that he faces on this long and arduous journey back home. Ada and her beloved father had lived in Charleston for most of Ada's life. But when Ada was a teenager, they moved to Black Cove so that Monroe could be a preacher there. Ada had been trained to lead a very quiet domestic life. Her life consisted of reading and music. Early in the novel, her father dies, and she is not married, and she is left alone. She is left on her own to survive, and she's not doing very well when the novel begins. Her fortunes change when some kind neighbors send another young woman her way. This woman is named Ruby. And Ruby is a very skilled worker and a very talented farmer. And these two women could not be more different. They actually have nothing in common, but they agree to live together as equals, taking care of Ada's farm. Ada is amazed by how hard she finds herself working, doing physical labor in order to survive, physical labor the likes of which she has never done before. So the narrative switches back and forth between the trials and tribulations of Inman on his road home and then Ada and Ruby trying to survive at home on the land. In our study of the novel, we would focus on several important themes. Certainly one of the most important themes is the effects of war on a society. The soldiers fighting in the war and the people left at home as well. While the novel does not describe in any detail the politics of the Civil War. It does deal with its impact on individual people and the literal and emotional wounds caused by war. By presenting the actual events of the Civil War, mostly in flashback, Frazier emphasizes that the destruction of the war was psychological as well as literal and physical. Inman is a former soldier on the southern side. At the beginning of the novel, he's in the hospital and badly wounded as the result of his service in battle. But although his neck wound will and does eventually heal, the trauma that he has sustained in battle is another matter altogether. He has vivid nightmares about the deaths of his friends and fellow soldiers, and he also feels a tremendous amount of guilt for his actions in the war and for enemy soldiers that he has had to kill. Ada Monroe also feels the trauma of the Civil War, but in a completely different way. The war, of course, takes Inman away from her, leaving her to a very uncertain future. But also the things that people normally turn to during times of crisis, such as family or organized religion, are nowhere to be found for Ada. If the devastation of the Civil War, as it's depicted in this novel, is largely psychological, the overarching question that the novel poses is, how do the survivors of a war go on? How do they move on with their lives, given their psychological wounds? Well, there's definitely no one easy answer to this, but the entire novel deals with this question. At first, Ada is really living a very stagnant life, and she's all alone on her father's farm, and she's practically starving to death. She doesn't see any viable future in her life. It's only after Ruby comes and lives with her and helps her that Ada is able herself to set definitive goals for her life. She realizes that she is able to maintain her family property. And when she realizes that she can do things that she never could have imagined, she also begins to imagine a future. By the same token, Inman's journey to return to Ada helps him to heal from his psychological wounds as a result of the war. He can either look ahead to a new future with Ada, or he can settle for this lifetime of nightmares. The harsh truth, which Ada realizes toward the end of the novel, is that there is nothing really inevitable about the healing process, and it takes tremendous willpower in order to get over one's wounds and one's trauma. Another major theme of the novel is the quest to return home. Charles Frazier has acknowledged in many interviews that this novel is deeply influenced by Homer's Odyssey, and there are many, many very direct parallels between the two works, and that was one of the things that we would also examine in our study of the novel. Inman spends most of the book trying to walk back to his hometown of Black Cove, where Ada Monroe, he hopes, is still living there. It is easy to surmise that Inman is also terrified of being sent back into battle once he recovers from his wounds. But that's not really the primary force that motivates him to leave the hospital and start this perilous journey home. Black Cove is Inman's home, and it's the only home he has ever known. He's lived there his entire life. One of the reasons that he loves Black Cove so much is that it doesn't change, that it has been a force of stability in his life. And Cold Mountain, the mountain overlooking Black Cove, will always be Cold Mountain. In the midst of this most traumatic war, Inman wants to return home. He wants to get back home and remind himself of who he was at home before the war took him away. Additionally, he wants to get home to Ada. He wants to move his relationship with her forward as well. The key point here is that Inman's quest to return to Black Cove is an intimately personal quest. With every step that he takes toward home, he reminds us, and really he reminds himself of his true identity, which he feels like he has, lost in the war. He rediscovers his lifelong connection to his hometown and his passionate love for Ada. We would also study Joseph Campbell's theory of the components of the hero's journey, a common motif in literature, whereby the hero goes off on a journey and goes through certain stages and faces certain challenges and obstacles on his quest, both for adventure and ultimately for a return to home. Then we would apply these various aspects of the quest to the novel. One interesting feature of quest narratives beginning with the Odyssey is the episodic structure. In Cold Mountain, Inman encounters lots of people along the way. But these people only stay in the story for a chapter or two. He meets them along the way. He has an encounter with them, sometimes for good, sometimes for ill, and then that character moves on and Inman moves on with his quest. These episodes challenge Inman, and they also change him. As the novel goes on, it becomes clear that Inman's encounters with strangers along the road to Black Cove test him in all kinds of ways, and they test his commitment to the quest itself. With every life-threatening encounter, Inman's devotion to Ada becomes stronger. By the time we get to the end of the novel, Inman's episodes have had an undeniable impact on his character. They've made him stronger, they've made him more mature, and they have made him even heroic. Additionally, we would also look at the theme of isolation and the need for community. in the novel, and we see this in the lives of both of the main characters. One of the greatest tragedies of the war was that it tore communities apart. The men who were old enough to serve in battle left their families behind, and the women were faced with the task of surviving, often by themselves, in lonely and sometimes empty households. Ada, Munro, and Inman each face, they both face different kinds of isolation. The novel presents us with literal, practical challenges of surviving on one's own as both Inman and Ada struggle to stay alive. And it also presents us with another more abstract struggle that includes the psychological challenges of profound loneliness. As the novel begins, Ada Munro is actually dying of starvation. She has been trained her entire life to study books and to study music, but she has almost no practical knowledge of how to maintain her life, how to maintain a thriving farm. It's not until Ruby, a capable and well-trained farmer, comes along and offers Ada help that Ada actually begins to survive. She has to learn how to do all kinds of things she never could have imagined, like pull a plow and plant seeds and do incredibly hard physical labor. In much the same way, Inman only succeeds in his survival because many people help him along the way home. One interesting question we might ask is why Ruby offers Ada the help that she does offer. Because she's quite capable of taking care of herself, and she doesn't need Ada as much as Ada needs her. Though it is certainly true that Ruby benefits from teaming up with Ada as well. But Frazier suggests, I think, that Ruby befriends Ada because she needs human companionship as well. Ruby needs companionship and nourishment and shelter, and so does Ada. And they find that in each other. This leads us to another challenge of isolation, the psychological toll of loneliness. And all of the characters in this book experience really profound loneliness. During Inman's journey back home, many people offer him food and shelter. And many of them who offer him help do so because they too are very lonely. In the end, I think this novel shows us that really community is one of the most important parts of the human experience. Human beings need community, a community based on cooperation between people. As the novel draws to a close, we see the fledgling community that Ruby and Ada and others who have also come along have built for themselves on Ada's farm. And this is a powerful reminder that in the midst of this dangerous and divisive war, community has become more important than ever before. This is an absolutely beautiful novel. It is part war story, part hero's quest, part love story, and it was absolutely one that I loved to teach. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.